Unit 2, Formative 2, Day 1. The first thing we're going to be learning about for this unit is absolute value equations. In order to do that, the first thing we need to do is define an absolute value. We've defined this before this year, but let's remind ourselves the absolute value means the distance from 0. Okay, and we have to remember that distance can never be negative, so the absolute value can never equal a negative number. Okay, so now the thing inside of the absolute value can be negative, but it's always going to give us a positive output. For instance, this first one, the absolute value of x equals 2. Okay, so that means x is 2 spots away from 0. Well, you can see 0 on my number line. If I go 2 spots to the right, okay, so if I go 1, 2 spots, that would put me right here at 2, okay, because so 2 is 2 spots away from 0. But you could also go backwards, 1, 2, so negative 2 is 2 spots from 0. Okay, so both of those would be answers. So in other words, the absolute value of x equals 2, well, x could equal 2, or x could equal negative 2. Okay, because the absolute value of 2 would be 2, the absolute value of negative 2 would be 2. Okay, so you can see that the absolute value could be a positive or a negative, depending on what's in there. So number 1, the absolute value of x plus 3 equals 5. Well, it could be to the right 5, or it could be to the left 5. So the first thing we need to do is set up two different equations. So x plus 3 could equal 5, or x plus 3 could equal negative 5. Both of those are possibilities, so I need to solve this equation twice to figure out what my two answers would be. So for that first one, if we subtract 3 from both sides, x could equal 2. For the second one, if we subtract 3 from both sides, x could equal negative 8. Okay, and then if I want to graph my answer, I have negative 8 and I have 2, and now we have been dealing a lot with inequalities. These are just equations, and so equations are just dots, points. Okay, so our answers could be negative 8 or they could be 2. Okay, let's try another one. Now this time the absolute value is not by itself yet, so I need to get it by itself. So to do that I need to move that 3. Well, that 3 is multiplied with the absolute value, so I will need to divide the 3. I'm going to tell you right now, you cannot distribute into an absolute value. They are not parentheses, you can't do it. Okay, so when we divide by 3, we get the absolute value of 4 minus x equals 6. So what that means is 4 minus x could be 6 spots away from 0, or it could be negative 6. So we need to set up two equations. So 4 minus x could equal 6, or 4 minus x could equal negative 6. So when I solve this, I subtract 4 from both sides. So you get negative x equals 2. Well, how do I get rid of that negative sign? I divide by a negative 1. So x equals negative 2. Or this other one, if I subtract 4, you get negative x equals negative 10. Divide by negative 1. And x equals positive 10. So my two answers would be negative 2 and 10. So if I put those on a number line, you have negative 2 and you have 10. Okay, and it's just closed circles on both because these are equations with equal signs. There's no shading because it's not an inequality. Okay, let's try another one. 3 times the absolute value of y plus 4 equals 13. The first thing you have to do is get the absolute value by itself. So we're going to subtract 4 from both sides. So we have 3 times the absolute value of y equals 9. Then we need to move that 3, so we divide both sides by 3. So you get the absolute value of y equals 3. Well, what that means is y could equal 3, or y could equal negative 3. Because you have to do two equations, and both of them are already solved. So we just need to graph. We have negative 3, we have positive 3. And again, these are equations, so just close dots. Okay? Let's just recap real quick the steps to solving absolute value equations. First thing you need to do is get the absolute value by itself. Okay, remember those lines mean absolute value. So get the absolute value by itself. Set up two equations, one for the positive, one for the negative answer. Okay, and then solve both. and graph. Okay, so if you follow those steps, solving absolute value equations will be fine. So get the absolute value by itself, set up two separate equations, solve them both. All right, we'll see you tomorrow.